Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Send me an email at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com. keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com to book your free session with me, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, however long it takes to help you to move through an issue you may be having. Not that you're broken, just because you want to expand to greater degrees of who you are, and that is the bliss that is so wanting to rise through you. Again, send me an email at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com and say, hey, Mr. Blanchard, I want my free session. I want to get you moving into your RPM potential. Recognize, plug in, manifest your life. Recognize where all creation lives, where God is, what it is, how to plug into that, and how to begin to manifest your life, because manifesting is the third component. Once you begin the recognition and the plugging in, things get out of the way. They get really, really easy. It becomes one of least effort. If you've been following my work for a while, go to centeroflightradio.com. On the opening page, you'll see two things. You'll see a sign-up form. Fill it out. You will get all my past works, all my creations that I used to charge money for up until this point, for free. And you will also begin to receive my newsletter program, which I'm going to start here shortly at the beginning of the year, by the way. Happy holidays, Happy New Year to you. Also, you'll see a red Ferrari on that screen. Once that car comes to a screeching halt, click on it. It will take you to the RPM program, which will tell you what you get and what you will create. Contact me on these two for sure. Let's get you to the new year moving nicely. If there's something you want to bring into your life, something that might represent your happiness, a car, cars are allowed. You want a new job? Jobs are awesome. You want to do what you love? Even better. So make sure you contact me there. And now it's time to get down to Center of Light Radio business. The number you dial to get on the show is 888-919-2355, 888-919-2355 to speak to myself or my guest today, Anastasia Netri. And the subject we're going to be speaking about, check this out. Self-realization, the key to finding calm in turbulent times. I saw a post about her book on social media recently. My dear Lord, one of the best book covers I've ever seen. Good-looking book covers. It's gorgeous. And you can feel the energy of this book right away. No kidding. So much so, I stopped what I was doing, found her on the internet, sent her a message right away. Let me tell you about my guest today. In times that feel unsure, there is a source of peace, oh Lord, inside of us. In this show, we will explore how to access that knowing so you can contribute to the world's evolution instead of being in a state of fear, reactivity, or avoidance. Anastasia Netri is a transformational coach who doesn't sugarcoat spirituality and personal growth and fluffy new age cliches. Dig that. Her first published book, Self-Realization for Regular People, was birthed from her own awakening experience in which she lost her false ego, as she calls it. Once she could see the truth, the words in this book exploded from her. Her flagship product is the Core Genius Map, the foundation of her coaching services. She is also the founder of Self-Realization Collective, a membership group with teachings, practices, tools, and community support. Grounded in her keen knack for business and lifted by her own journey towards self-realization, Anastasia is gifted at seeing her clients through the darkest pain. God, where was she some years ago for me? And the brightest light, holding safe space from them to go deep. That's where it's at. And delivering measurable results in their personal and business lives. You can find more about my guest today at www.anastasianetri.com. Let me spell that for you. www.anastasianetri.com. Welcome to Center of Light Radio, Anastasia.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me this evening.
Well, we're gonna have some fun. You can bet on that. some new software, putting new stuff
There
on
you
my
go.
head. There we go. So even though in your bio, it gave us a little bit about your beginnings, I want to know more about your beginnings because I always feel that when others can really see where we all come from, the people who are doing the work and having such success at doing said work, it makes it a little more tangible for them. We can go out and see a public speaking of Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer or Marianne Williamson, and we get the knowledge and we get the insights, but that lifestyle seems a gazillion miles away. They're on this huge stage wearing all this nice clothes. But I think when we learn the background and the bumps and bruises that everyone has obtained, it comes a little more tangible. How did this all get kicked off for you?
Well, I will start with like what I call the awakening before the awakening. So I have been, kind of a creative person and an entrepreneur, beat to my own drum, couldn't understand why we were doing certain things on the planet from a very young age. Like I remember when I was about 19, I was like, wait a minute. You want me to, wait, you're telling me to decide what I want now for the rest of my life, go and get a job and wear pantyhose every day and work full time. And then when I'm like 60, you're going to give my life back to me? That doesn't even make sense. And it was just things like that for a long time I felt those kinds of thoughts weren't easy because I didn't really have anyone around who could validate anything for me. It was just a lot of people kind of doing these rote decisions in life, and I started to kind of question them. So I began this life as an entrepreneur, but I was doing kind of one thing after another. I had several different businesses, and I was always really successful, and I was always very ambitious and very resourceful. And my last business that I started, when I started coaching in 2008, things really exploded for me a couple of years after I started, and I became very well known, started getting my practice filled, started making more and more and more money, and I reached this kind of pinnacle in 2014 where I had everything I had been dreaming of for years. I lived in a big house, had a big 3,500 square foot house in the Bay Area of Northern California, was making, close to a couple $100,000 a year, had a, fancy group of friends and a lot of notoriety and, little pockets of, with air quotes, fame in my little community. And when I hit this point, it was, and at that year I had all this stuff, all this money and everything, and a week off every month, right? So it was like I was living this very idyllic lifestyle, one that I had been working towards for, nearly 20 years. And when I hit that point, there was something really interesting that happened. Nothing had changed. I wasn't any happier. As a matter of fact, I was more miserable, more anxious than I had ever been. It was very disorienting because this thing I had been working towards my whole life didn't do it. It didn't fill the void. And now when I had hit it, it was this very distressing time of going, well, now what? Like, everything I had been focused on for so long just became meaningless, and it wasn't an easy realization. It was like that moment in which I don't even know where to go with my life. And I had this kind of, it was an initial awakening, because I feel like awakening is not something that just, especially with what I'm seeing today and every day for a while now, awakening is not something that like happens and then you're done. There's this kind of thing that sort of can happen for years, and I'll talk more about that. But it began this process, this awakening I had just said, just be you and life will get easier. And that's, sounds simple enough, right? It's like, oh, okay, I'll just be me. And that began a journey of these things that I always describe in the awakening process. And I always say it's got these two main elements to it, which are discovery and destruction. Like, as the more that you discover about who you are, the more something that's who you're not falls apart simultaneously. So it's always this kind of thing that when the more awareness that you gain, often it comes with a loss of some kind. And usually that loss is, well, not usually, always the loss is something that isn't worth hanging on to anyway. It's not something that's really fulfilling you in some way. It's just kind of something that's making more and more and more and more room, inside. And so this process happened where I just sort of burned my business to the ground and was like, you know what, I have to let go of all this that I've built, because I've built it on top of this idea of feeling very unwanted and using my business as a way to have people see me. And I'm not able to let it in, so I just need to let it go. And that, again, that was a process that happened in a lot of steps and stages. One little brick coming down at a time over, a period of about 3 years. And then I had what I call the dissolving of the false ego. And that happened earlier this year. It's like what I call the false ego is the identity that you build on top of some version of I'm not good enough, right? So you can believe that you're not good enough, or you're unworthy or unwanted, and then you begin to form an identity. It could be a way to overcompensate for that in a way. It's like a way to feel good enough, even though it may not be you. And once that false ego dissolves, you're not done, but that's, I believe, from what I've seen this year, that's when a really much deeper layer of awakening can happen. Because as long as you're operating from I'm not good enough, it's like wearing, just a pair of, really dark colored glasses over your eyes. And once those come off, then you start to see things more and more clear, and many more things come up, and many more things, start to dissolve. And it's just like I'm in it, and I'm seeing this sort of ongoing process of it.
Let me ask you this. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So Anastasia some years ago realized that things have not changed, and now you have this, it would be an epiphany. Now what? So now you have this now what? In you relinquishing and you surrendering all of that stuff and becoming simply you, did all this wisdom, all this knowledge just begin to pour into you just by saying, I'm just going to be happy in the moment? Or did you actually learn this from a mentor, or was this breaking down your door? I mean, were you finding yourself at points overwhelmed?
Let me put it this way, Keith. It wasn't that, like, when I sat down to write my book, first of all, I didn't sit down to write a book. I just started writing. And as things started to come out through the book, which is some of the wisdom I had collected thus far, it wasn't that, it was all stuff that I wasn't able to share as long as, see, my particular flavor of false ego was I'm unwanted, right? So as long as I believed that I was unwanted and unwelcome and that the world didn't want anything from me and I wasn't even supposed to be here, it was just this big block, if you will, to sharing this stuff.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, so it was like once that thing was lifted, it was just like, an initial dam broke, so to speak. So it
Right.
was just sort of sharing a lot of the truths that I found in my own journey. Like I have seen that there's awakening is a big deal. It's like, it's I think the movie The Matrix really sort of nails it when he says, do you want to know the truth, or do you want to, just go back to your life? And it's not like when he woke up and saw that he was just a battery and that he was a slave, like that wasn't an easy thing to see. But you can't do anything about it. You've got zero chance at freedom until you can start to see the truth. And often that initial truth that you see is like not fun. It's like, oh my God, you see all the ways that you've been lying to yourself and all the ways that you've been BSing yourself and all this stuff that you believe that's not true. And that is definitely overwhelming. But it became like, I think one of the things that was so wonderful about reaching a pinnacle of success, external success, is that I don't think I could have even started this awakening journey as long as I held the thought and the belief in my head that that stuff is going to do it for me. Not that that stuff isn't great, but often the reason that we want that stuff is because we think it's going to fill us or make us good enough, right? And so that's when the jig was up.
And I often tell people that I work with when I do the RPM program that I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast is stuff is cool. It's fun. Let's use the analogy. You want a red Ferrari. You really don't want the car. What you really want is the feeling that the car is going to bring you in your life. So if we begin to play in the dynamic and the energy of the feeling, the more we begin to vibrate to that which we think what we want, it would be the car. From the chat room, there's a couple of questions that are being asked. Would you like to take a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Let's see. Someone asked, is Anastasia looking at this chat? And I commented, I don't think so. So, Catalina, if you have a question, please bring that forth. Someone asked a question, devil in disguise. He asked a question, I have an alter ego. Is that the same?
Okay, let me see if I can find the chat so I could get in there with you and get a little visual here. Oh, okay, it's on the Facebook post.
Welcome everyone in the chat room. Welcome to Center of Light Radio. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find me here. Today, my guest is Anastasia Netri, and we are talking about self-realization, how to be calm in turbulent times.
So I see this. I have an alter ego. Is that the same? So let me devil in disguise. Let me see what I can do with that question, and I'll. I wouldn't know enough about you to say one way or another, but I can maybe give you a couple of little things to think about, and you can see what comes up for you. So the way that I like ego is an identity, right? It's like that, just in its most basic form. That's what it is. Without judgment of good or bad, right or wrong. Identity is just who you are as a human. Even upon going to a place of where you can experience your oneness, there will still be that, like, for instance, super God-realized enlightened teachers still have a unique identity to them. It's just that they're not over-identified with that. They don't think that that's all there is, right? So they see themselves more as a puzzle piece, if you will. And that's kind of how what our true ego, what I call your true ego, kind of is. It's just your particular puzzle piece, your particular unique expression. Then there's the false ego, and the false ego is built, it's an identity of you that doesn't exist. It's not real. And let me give you a really practical example of this. And Keith, jump in anytime if you've got something to add here.
I will, I promise.
Okay, good. So let's say that you are your true ego, your true identity, so to speak, is a very creative, artistic type. But you're born into a very left brain, engineering, business-minded family. And during your childhood, you are slammed with the idea that artistic stuff is frivolous, and the only thing that is going to make you safe in the world is knowing business and all this stuff. And so you make this decision in your mind that being an artist is not good. It's not good enough. Like, in order to fit in, feel safe, belong in the world, you need to be a business person. So you start to make choice after choice after choice after choice after choice. You find yourself maybe in certain kinds of relationships, with certain kinds of jobs, with a certain kind of house and a car and a life and a mortgage and all this stuff that reflects this thing that's not you, that's never, ever, ever been you. And then the glorious midlife crisis hits. The glorious midlife crisis. Midlife is a time, the midlife crisis is so famous because once we get like anywhere from like 35 to 55, somewhere in that era, that's when the novelty of being an adult sort of wears off, and we're like, wait a minute, why am I just hating my life? And especially if you've got some kind of outward, everything's good. So that's a false ego, and that causes pain 100% of the time, because as opposed to being you, you're trying to be whatever you think you should be. So you can maybe think about where your alter ego might kick in, and yes, maybe that is, maybe it isn't. So I hope that helps.
I love what you said about the analogy of if you one who are in relationship, you didn't really say this, but I kind of got the idea, you alluding to the idea of that when we're in a relationship and we don't resolve something, the relationship breaks up and we get into another one somewhere down the road, it's really the same energy with a different name and a different face. It's the same job, same dynamic happens. But when we find, speaking for myself, when I realized, my mother at an early age said, Keith, cut your hair, put the guitar down. I'm sure you'd be really good at it. Go get a job. And I ignored her. And I stayed true, and I'm able to play for a living. I don't work for a living. I play. And it's something happens when you begin to live in that dynamic and from that disposition. Effortless seems to, it just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and here's the thing about that, Keith, because that's a, you know, it depends on who you are. If it's, I found for some people it's not quite just it's a great in concept, right? But in practice, you know, this is like when, let's just take an example of somebody who, you know, maybe finds themselves with this whole life built on top of something that's not them, which is so many people. And, you know, letting it go and getting to know who you are and what you want is, you know, it can mean losing your home, your spouse, you know, your relationship with your kids may go to crap for a while. You may lose your job, your money. It's very scary, right? And so it just depends on how much you've got built up. However, I think the point in which somebody is kind of ready to look at this stuff is, I have this quote that I put on a while ago, and I've found it to be true pretty much all the time as I've looked into my own, like, what is it that makes somebody change their route in life versus continue the one that makes them miserable. And the point is, when the known future becomes scarier than the unknown future, that's the moment that you're ready to let it go. Like, it's kind of like, and again, letting it go may be a process, but it's like, that's the moment in which something inside of you flips. And it's like, you know what? I don't know what's out there, but I know if I'm here in this place doing this crap a year from now, I will jump off the bridge, or some sentiment like that. You know what I mean? And it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
so that's a moment that people hit, and some people are lucky to hit it younger in life than others. And some people, you know, when you're 40 or 50 or have a huge life amassed on top of this stuff, I mean, it gets tricky. So
You know what came to mind? First of all, I want to echo something you said differently. Sadhguru says, when you're alone and you are miserable, you are in terrible company. But something you just said, I swear to you, it sounded like suicide. Someone who's living such a stressful life, and they're distraught, and they're living in fear, and they're living in darkness. When they're presented with the idea to take themselves out, to basically die, to commit suicide, or a spiritual suicide, because what's next as my choice has to be greater than this. It just dawned on me, it's sort of a spiritual suicide, because I was definitely in that place years ago, to where I was holding on to this pain, this girl that left, this pain, and then I realized that, dear Lord, it's got to be better than this. And boy, like you said, I moved through the window just like that.
You know, it's always a different process for everyone in the nature of how someone goes from a path in which they're walking where they're just kind of in this state of just very deep suffering. But the moment is kind of like that for everybody in some way. The moment is something to the effect of, you know, what the hell? It's a great moment, because in that moment, you snap yourself out of an autopilot loop of the mind prison loop, I like to call it. And you snap out and go into the observer role, where you can kind of see yourself, even if it's just for a moment. And in that observer role, you have choices to make, where when you're in that loop, you don't have choices to make. Like there's a lot of talk out there about, you know, well, just choose differently. And I'm like, but when you can't see that you're on the hamster wheel, like when you're on the hamster wheel, you're just like, I'm just running and I'm exhausted. It never ends. What is this thing going to end? But you don't know you're on it. You can't make a choice to get off. It's only when you stop and pull back and go, oh my God, I've been running on this freaking
that's a pretty powerful analogy that you're doing, because I use that one all the time. And I liken it to control. And we call control a wheel in our chest that spins this way. Yeah. And if we're a control fanatic, that thing really, really moves. So here's control. And the more we control our lives, the faster the wheel spins. But when we start to relinquish control, the wheel stops. And when it stops, that's when things can begin to feel a little weird, because there's no motion. But if you hang tight, the wheel begins to move this way. And then we find ourselves being pushed by the cosmic life stream, and we're in a space of no effort.
So that, yes, I'm going to yes and that. And I'm so excited. I've been bursting to add this to what you're saying. Because this is a really big thing for everyone that's listening right now. I just invite you to take a deep breath and let this thing in, what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to echo what Keith said and just add another seed to this. So just breathe this in. Take a good deep breath. You've never been in control.
Right?
Ever. It is a fantasy. So when you are at war with reality is that you have never, ever been able to control it. The more you try to control it, you are at war with reality. And when you are at war with reality, which is there is no such thing as control, because control implies permanence. There is no such thing as permanence. When you try to create permanence, when you try to hold on to a feeling, to a state, to a person, to a lifestyle, to your like everything, the only constant in life is that everything changes. Impermanence is truth, is reality. trying to create permanence, trying to create control, trying to avoid the reality as the nature of impermanence, the flow of life, you suffer all the time. So just take that in, because you're right. You know, the way you can stop trying to control is to realize right now you've never been able to do it. You just never ever been able to do it successfully. So, woo!
Fantastic. And I know the burst of energy you're feeling, because sometimes when something comes through me so strong and so passionately, it's almost as if I'm going to explode if I don't get it out. We're at the bottom of the hour. Would you like to give out a shout out to the listening audience where they can find more about you, any of your works, any events you might be speaking at, all that good stuff? Give out your info so this full chat room can find out what you're doing, girl.
Well, the best way to kind of connect with me is just to go to my website. It's the, I can type it into the chat. I've got the chat up here. And it's anastasianetri.com. You can just Google me. You can just Google Anastasia Netri and you'll see my website. You can see the book on there. I think the book, The Self-Realization for Regular People, and the tagline to the book is no chanting, yoga pants, or hard drugs required. Because this is really more about what really is involved in this journey of freedom and truth. And that's a great place to start if you want to learn more, if you want to connect. You know, you can get the book and read the book and see where it leads from there.
Center of Light Radio every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. My name is Keith Anthony Blanchard, your host. My guest today is Anastasia Netri, and we're speaking about lots of really cool, spiritual, empowering things, self-realization, how to be calm in a chaotic, stressful, moving world. From the chat room, Oculus asked a question. Hi, Anastasia. Where do you think our place in the cosmos is? Are we on our own, or do we have kindred souls living in another galaxy? I'm not sure if that's your kind of field, or is it?
It's not. I'm not. I don't know. I'll answer the question as best as I can, which is actually my natural response to something like that is, what are you interested in knowing really? Is it just, are you feeling like you want to see if you're alone? You're wanting to understand yourself in a bigger sense? You're wanting to understand more of your own spiritual nature? What I have found is there is a mystery to things. I have direct experience with something bigger. I know I'm part of something bigger. And the nature of that keeps unfolding for me every day. It just keeps unfolding, because remember what I just said about nothing's permanent. No, not even a particular state in my own awakening is permanent. Like what I was awakened to yesterday feels like a lifetime away. And so there's just, I think it's, your answers are just inside somewhere. And I'd be curious to know, what you're really looking for with that question. What would, if I said, yes, there's beings, and yes, we're not alone, and the cosmos is this and this, and it's divided into 10 different dimensions, my question is, what would that do for you? And maybe that's a question to ask yourself.
Love it. And I will tell you, yes, there are others. We're on a rock called Earth. But you can bet that the real you is not positioned on Earth. We are not separated from the Godhead or creation, or there, if you want to use that analogy or that metaphor. Because if you remove yourself from your checking account collapses. So if we were disconnected from where we came from, we cannot project ourselves here to be in the strata, and you would just disappear. That is an absolute fact. So we're not disconnected from where we came from, except consciously. And that's my whole gig, is to do the work required, like Anastasia and I, and many upon many other millions of people who get clear, will remove the blinders. You know, we think this is seeing our whole life. I could see pretty good until something happens that does this, and we go, wow, this is what seeing is? The whole dynamic begins to change. It's something I want to clear up. That Katniss from the chat room said spiritual, she's quoting me, when I said spiritual suicide, she says, whoa, that's heavy stuff. Let me rephrase that. That's not spiritual suicide. That is a divine birth. That would be false ego suicide. There we go.
Yeah.
False ego suicide.
And it's like the only thing that, you know, death and birth are part of your life right in this moment, right in this moment, since we've been having this conversation on this, in this wonderful space that we've all created together. You have had thousands of cells in your body die and thousands of cells in your body be reborn. You have taken in and out, you know, buckets of air inside of your lungs. There's been, you know, movement and breath, and your blood is moving through your body, and the air in the room has changed. Nothing is the same as it was a minute ago, half an hour ago. And so it's like the idea that we want to avoid death of, you know, certain beliefs, certain, you know, identities that aren't working. It's like whatever you're I can promise you all this, whatever you're clinging tightly to will cause you to suffer, because you can't cling to it. When you understand the nature of life is that it cycles in and out, then you can be in harmony with it, and things can work better. You know, I put an example of this in my book where I say, you know, like, it's a good time. I don't know where all of your listeners are, but I'm in Tennessee, Memphis, where Keith lives. And the trees, the leaves are falling from the trees right now. And if you saw someone like out there frantically with a ladder and glue, trying to put the leaves back on the tree, saying this is not the way the tree is supposed to be,
right,
you would think that person is insane. And I'm like, well, then what are you doing with your ideas, your beliefs, all the things that you're hanging on to? It's just as crazy.
That's very powerful. What a very powerful analogy. Really, and the only thing that will never change is that change is forever. You cannot change that fact.
Right.
So let me ask you this. You said that we were never in control, and I get exactly the inside of what you mean. But do we sometimes have control? Meaning, I am able to influence what I want because I'm now open, and I can kind of nudge things to happen according to, you know, I'm here on the earth. I like to experience some cool things or cool situations or whatever. Do I have any creative capacity within me to bring about some, right?
Yeah,
so that would be my question.
It's there's a difference between this is a really good question, because a lot of people ask this. So there's different schools of thought, but I want to speak to the one that you just talked about, because I know a lot of people are interested in, you know, manifesting what they want and part of the intention, vibration conversation. And the thing about it is that there's a difference between intention and attachment, right? And so it's when you feel like these things that you're wanting to have or to do or to experience. No, of course there's nothing wrong with that. And yes, of course, you know, you can set intentions, you can take particular actions, you can do quite a lot to influence what happens in your life. And you just have to keep kind of gut checking, because if you're trying to create things from a space of this thing in the future, this salvation in the future will make me feel whole, will make me feel happy, will make me feel good and keep me in a state of feeling good, then everything kind of is being created from that point. And interestingly enough, I find that that's the reason why most people are so dead set on manifesting. It's like they won't say it out loud, but what they're really doing is saying, when I get this, then I'm going to be happy. So I say, First of all, I would never try to talk somebody out of that for several reasons. Number one, I don't know their life path. And number two, I think the best thing that can ever happen for you is to get everything that you externally want. Because everyone that has will tell you it will not fill you up. And sometimes that's the only way to find out. So manifest away, get there, get all the stuff you want. Once you, the ironic fact is that once you are coming from a place of not needing, then you don't typically spend as much time focused on, I need to manifest something. So the irony is, the more you're focused on intending and manifesting, it's a good place to stop and just take a deeper look and go, what am I really wanting from all this, and use it as a good starting off point to a deeper inquiry, just to check in with yourself about it, but make sure you're not on a hamster wheel. But yeah, of course you can influence your life, and of course you can manifest stuff, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. So it's always about just taking a look at the deeper reason for why you're doing what you're doing.
And doing that, one begins to manifest what they really are, who they really are inside. And like you said, those things you really don't want. But if I get that, that would be as cool as heck. I could use a red Ferrari, but if I don't get it, it's not what I'm wanting. So when I develop that space in me, that is the joy of what I'm blaming as the excuse, be it the car, be it the loved one, be it the this, be it the that. And if you get it, fantastic. And if you don't, you are filled full of bliss regardless. So it's a win-win.
Exactly.
It's a win-win.
This Zena, I guess that's how to pronounce it, on the chat room, she said, okay, when are you going to talk about the subject matter at hand, which is how do you manage to stay positive, Anastasia, in terms of turbulent times? And I think this is kind of piggybacking what I just said. First of all, I want to really make sure I emphasize this, that I actually didn't say stay positive, because positive is trying to create a state of permanence. I said calm, and I feel like what I probably should have said is peaceful. Let me give you my particular experience of peace, okay? Because yeah, if I had to go back and do the show title again, I would have said how to stay peaceful in turbulent times. And then I do want to answer this, because I feel like there's a lot that's going on for people right now, and it can be a very scary time. We have a lot of unknowns ahead, and a lot of the unknowns that we feel very out of control, right? So in a bad way, like we have no say-so in these bad forces that are going to come in and change our lives and create something that we don't want. And it's totally understandable, especially depending on how plugged into the media you are. It's very scary. So when I say peace, my particular experience of peace is not one where it's a constant state of calm, which is why I feel like I made a mistake with that word. But it's more of a ability to be in whatever flow is happening at the moment. So I kind of define peace as, think of it like a river, right? Like if you're going down a river, there's certain spots that are very calm and cool, and there's certain spots that are in level 5 rapids. And all of those things are necessary for that thing to move, right? Sometimes in your life, you do need to be, smacked and jarred and woken up and snapped out of your slumber. So those turbulent times that are happening right now are having a very jarring effect. And so part of the way to stay, peaceful during these times is to number one, kind of look at what's getting jarred. When I talked earlier about somewhere in the future holds my salvation or my happiness with whatever this thing is, it's like a lot of times when we're feeling surrounded by forces that are making us feel scared about our safety or our lifestyle, the best place that you can turn is inside, focused on your own realization of self. That's really the only thing to ground onto, because the less you know about who you are, really, the less you really know about who you are, the more you're just being blown around, and you can feel very lost during all this. So, you know, the short answer, we can flesh this out more, and I'd love to hear more of your questions, and I'm sure, you know, Keith, you have some input as well, but the more that you can sort of ground into, what is this thing out there triggering inside of me? What is that telling me? What is the opportunity for me? What can I see? What can I learn? That's the key right now. We need that more than ever. We need that more than you trying to be positive all the time, because sometimes being positive all the time is trying to a way to ignore stuff that really needs to be looked at, which will lead you to a place of feeling a lot more free and a lot more connected than just trying to be positive all the time. So it's kind of like, you know, life has this flow to it. There's ups and downs, and there's good reasons for that. But yeah, I think I just want to start that conversation there, which is to be using this time of all of these things being shaken up. There's a lot being shaken up, because that's what happens when the world shifts. When the world shifts, it's not pretty. It's not pretty, because our ways of life are changing, and in order for them to change, yes, we have to pull some of these things out of the shadows, or we're not going to get anywhere. And pulling things out of the shadows sucks. There's absolutely nothing fun about it. There's a reason that crap is in the shadows, because we don't want to look at it, because it's not fun. But ironically, the things that are in those shadows are the very things that are keeping us unhappy, feeling stuck, feeling scared. So it's like, as we turn to face them, we feel less stuck, less scared, more empowered.
Something you said a bit ago, I want to resound, and I want to actually turn the volume up and turn the fire up a little bit more.
Okay.
I did a Burst of Light live feed the other night, and I was talking about, you had just mentioned how the outside does this and we get moved side to side.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't want to let the negative people, the negative events in our lives move us.
Right.
Here's a new idea. Don't let the positive people move you either. Because it's exactly what Anastasia just said. Don't be positive all the time, because what you think is positive, or negative, and vice versa. So if you're hanging out with people and it's a joyful crowd, don't let them sway you. Be more joyful. Be the dominant, so to speak, tone. And if you could find that kind of center and be the rock like Peter, dear Lord, you could turn up the joy in that room even more powerful than you just be swayed by everybody else. So don't be swayed, period, right, left, in, out, up, down, good, bad. You be the plant. You be anchored. You be the lightning rod. Then watch what happens.
Right. Yes, and the key to being able to do that is to know more about who you actually are. It's like, otherwise you walk through the world, you know, like, if you're walking through the world looking for approval, trying to fit in, trying to belong, trying to feel safe, trying to get love, trying to get attention, trying to gain this, you are not rooted. You are looking for external stuff. And again, it's not a bad thing. Like, I think, you know, I had, and still have, I don't want to make this sound like all of my awakening is in the past, because that's wouldn't be awake to see that. Like,
false ego.
It's an ongoing thing. But you know, what I found is that I had to in order for me to wake up and find some kind of peace where it's like, the more I discovered, the more I was able to let stuff go, and I was able to be in the flow. And does that mean I'm always positive? No, because I wouldn't even try to be, right? I go with what happens, because sometimes during periods of awakening, I have to go crawl in a hole for about 3 days and just feel. And anyway, but not to digress too much on that, but it's just this idea that sometimes we have to get real with ourselves about, like, it was a shocker for me to get real with myself about how much I wanted approval and attention, and how everything in my life was just a way to do that. You know, I look at videos of myself years ago, and it's just, I had slap. I've taken so much down off the, you know, I've had hundreds of videos that I used to put up with my old business, and you know, there's a whole bunch still out there because I had so much content out in the world. And I was looking at this other video a few weeks ago, and I just was talking to this friend of mine, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just, you know, so about authenticity. And I just look back going, oh my God, it was so full of shit when I said that. And it was just, I didn't know it at the time, but I had to. Waking up for me required a lot of crow eating. Like, I had to dine on a steady diet of crow for like a long time, and I still do. Like, when those old familiar things kind of pop up and grasp on, you know, I have to stop and look at them, and I usually have to say something out loud, because anytime that something's coming up that I know is going to bring any kind of shame or whatever it is, I have to say it out loud to somebody, and it diffuses it. And in the moment that I say it, it just starts to get diffused, and I can see what's happening, and then that pull has less and less grip. But, you know, most awakened teachers will tell you this. Like, even when you start to really have these big awakenings, this stuff still pops up. It's just, do you have the ability to recognize it when it does, so that it can just continue its dissolving process? My dissolving process may, you know, take years and years and years, but that stuff doesn't grab on and hold on in the same way that it used to. And because of that, I'm not walking around in a state of just, you know, sheer suffering 24 hours a day, which is great.
Anastasia, do you think it's like it comes in doses? Well, obviously it does, but it's levels. For example, I'm starting my conscious path now. So I have all this stuff, and I do work for a year, and it seems like, as you mentioned, wow, I'm done with it. And it comes up later. It's because we learn to become familiar with what it feels like to be the new us. So the feeling gets more subtle and subtle because now we're integrated with it. We don't know that there's a dissonance happening. So when it comes up again, it's like, it's obvious this is not part of what I've been doing or who I am for the moment. So you think it comes in waves, obviously?
I think it's, yes, I definitely think it comes in waves, and it comes, a lot of things come when they're ready to come, because there's a lot of things I'm able to see now. Like, here's kind of I wrote an article about this on my blog. So if you want to go look at my blog, I wrote the 4 stages of self-realization. And it's kind of like, you know, there's that, oh shit, you know, first stage, and that's when, you know, but here's kind of like my little short summary of this. It's like, this is what that core genius map is. It's like, I kind of dig around in somebody's life and really listen to them, and sort of, I can reflect this, like, here's who you are before you're imprinting. And I find that sometimes when you can get, like, really have that witness and named and know it, and start integrating that and going in that direction. Like the artist who was the business person, it's like we get them back on the track of being an artist. Inside of that track, sometimes at that point, that's when you're opening to these deeper awakenings, right? Like, first it's like, let's get you out of this, you know, totally wrong path for you, because I believe that somebody's core genius is their path to those deeper connections. It's like the path back to oneness, right? Starts with your uniqueness. I know it sounds kind of paradoxical, but it's not really. And yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, I'm glad you're at a pause. Everyone, make sure you go check out that article. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you for being a powerful, enlightening guest on Center of Light. Time flies when you're having a good time, right?
Yes, that was great.
Would you like to leave a very small closing comment, a final thought? We got 1 minute.
The final thought I want to leave you with is that remember, don't believe your thoughts. And keep looking inside. All of your answers are there. And don't try to do it alone. I'll leave you with that.
Anastasia Netri, thank you so much. Bert, you're welcome anytime, dear.
Thank you.
Everyone probably standing up in the chat room applauding. I have a full chat room tonight. Wow. Next week on Center of Light Radio, check this out. For all you X-File people out there, the real life Mulder is going to be on Center of Light Radio. His name is John D'Souza. He's got a brand new book out called Clear Hearers. What is a clear hero? Wait till you hear the story this cat is going to be laying on you next week, working as a special agent, as an FBI. He's got stories that, I'm serious, that parallel with X-Files as to why he's had many coming together with them. So next week on Center of Light Radio, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, John D'Souza is going to be here. I want to say thank you all for being here again, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. When you have nothing to do tonight, you're laying down, you're going to bed. You have nothing to do. Close your eyes and breathe in and out. Breathe like you want something far beyond you have ever known. 10 or 15 minutes of that, you will find yourself in deafening silence. And in that space, you will hear yourself and your divine parent. Be well, and always remember to ease into bliss. It's right there.